Hi, I'm Franklin, and this is Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. How I Graduated from Law School with a Job is a series of interviews with practicing attorneys and legal professionals to find out more about their career journey. The purpose is for you to hear about how other legal professionals became employed and started their career following law school, or in some cases, how they relaunched their careers at a later stage in their professional life. It's not just young lawyers that we'll be talking with, but attorneys across all levels of experience and practice areas. The purpose isn't to try and prove the legal job market is perfect, because it's not, or convince you it's easy to get a job and there are tons of jobs out there, because there aren't. However, I do hope you gain some insights, ideas, tips, or other pieces of advice that can help you and your law school strategy. Because I do believe that if you work hard, follow the advice we share, you'll be closer than ever to graduating from law school with a job. On this episode, we have Ray Panneton from Houston, Texas. Hey, Ray.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us. So I'll go ahead and kick off with the first question. Why did you go to law school, and what did you study before law school?
So why I went to law school, I really hate that question because people expect this really profound answer of this passion for justice and all that. And truthfully, that's not my path. My path started out as pre-med in undergrad. And after taking some of my biology courses and chemistry courses, I quickly realized that it necessarily wasn't the path for me. So I had to quickly find something that kind of fit with my passion and my personality. And I really found a niche within, pre-law. I like the intellectual side of it. I like the sparring, if you will, that the law provides. And so I really kind of just dove into that. But I started my undergrad not even thinking about law school. I was thinking about med school, actually.
So you mentioned pre-law. I've heard some people say that they're not big fans of it, but it sounds like your undergraduate school had a pretty good program. Do you want to dive into that a little more?
So I did my undergraduate work at Baylor, and when I went through there, the pre-law program was more of an idea at that point. It didn't really take shape until my last year there, of course. But they were really trying to develop this program that kind of puts you on the path towards law school. And, the good thing about law school is there's no such thing as the path. It's not like pre-med where you take this many biology courses and this many chemistry courses and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready for med school. Law school is just, no matter what your background is or what your major is, law school could be the choice for you. So they're really trying to develop this program at Baylor of, okay, although you can come from any background, there are certain skills that you're going to need in law school, and that's logic, that's writing, that's reasoning. And they really focused on getting you involved in the philosophy department, which is a department as a whole I avoided like the plague. But they really kind of drove me there against my will, I'll add, to get me into logic classes and get me into the writing classes that are not so much based in your major, but based in this kind of intellectual side of things. And truthfully, that was the greatest thing I've ever done in terms of my legal career.
So what was it? Going to law school straight from undergrad, or did you take any time off or do any other degrees?
So I went straight through. I did the traditional route, if you will, and did straight from high school to undergrad to law school. And it wasn't because I was a great student or I was really eager to get in the job market. It's simply a function of knowing my personality, in that if I did take time off to get a job, I would probably never go back to school. My personality is one that I like to work, I like a job, and I like a task. So if I was to take a job in the interim, odds are, knowing my own personality and taking a personal appraisal of my strengths and weaknesses, I would have probably not gone. So I really forced myself to push through and go straight to law school.
Great. And so now I'll ask you the question that pretty much everybody wants to know is, did you graduate from law school with a job?
I did. And again, it's not because I had this 4.0 GPA, because, like 90% of everyone who goes to law school, I was not in the top 10%. In knowing that, I knew I had to really advocate for myself. So I chose to start working my first year of law school, and it was for no pay. But I was the first in my family to go to college, therefore the first to go to law school. So I really entered this profession not knowing anything or anybody. So I knew I had to make inroads, even if it meant, working for free. So I started my working, my first year of law school, worked straight through law school, and that's really what led me to graduate with a job.
Wow. So I definitely I see your ABA pin you have on the American Bar Association. Were
Yes.
you involved in the ABA at all throughout law school?
Yes, I joined the ABA as a law student member. And back then you had to join and pay, but now it's free for law students. So the ABA Wildey offers such a great resource that I really didn't have available to me. The past couple of years, they've really focused on getting law students employed and connected with employers. The ABA Law Student Division now has a job board. The ABA YLD, the Young Lawyers Division, has a job board. They're creating young lawyer toolkits. And the reason they're doing that is because the ABA, YLD, and the Law Student Division have really identified the fact that, one, the legal market is not what it used to be, and two, a lot of young lawyers and law students are looking at opening their own law firms. So the ABA, YLD, and Law Student Division have really provided this great toolkit for young lawyers where now it's less of, oh yeah, I'm a member of the ABA because that's what everyone does. And now it's more of, I joined the ABA as a law student because there are resources that are, one, valuable, and two, will connect me with employers. So I encourage all law students listening to this to join the Law Student Division. It's free, and it's got such a vast amount of resources that you can't go wrong.
Definitely. I agree with that as well. So let's back up just a little bit to law school. Can you
Okay.
talk more about what specific internships or externships or judicial clerkships you might have had that helped you progress throughout law school, and how you got those?
Sure. So this is a story I don't get to tell very often, but my first legal job I found on Craigslist. And I truly mean that. Like, there is a legal section under jobs on Craigslist, and that's where I found my first job. It was with a family lawyer here in Houston, and the only thing I did was I would go to her office, get the discovery that was served on her, take it back to my apartment, and just type it up. And I was doing this for, I think, $7 an hour. But again, like I alluded to before, I knew I was going to meet an attorney, and I knew I was going to get some kind of practical experience and maybe even a letter of recommendation out of the end of it. So that's how I found my first legal job my first year. And that kind of bootstrapped. I knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do, so I kept looking, but it was income. So I kept looking on Craigslist, actually, because, again, I had no idea of all these resources to find jobs that existed. So, and I knew I didn't want to rely on the school's, career services. So I really took it upon myself and used my own initiative to find something. And I found the second legal job on Craigslist. And it was started out as just responding to doing a jury questionnaire, essentially. So this law firm was conducting a mock trial to assess their position, and we're looking for just jurors, mock jurors. So I responded to that. It was, 2 hours, $60, that, feeds me for a week or so. And I knew there's going to be two lawyers there. So I put in my name to be considered, and they selected me. And I showed up in full suit and tie. I had some business cards made up at Office Depot and 2 copies of my CV in my hand, because I knew at the end of the day I was going to shove it in those lawyers' hands whether they liked it or not.
And did that work?
Yeah, it did, actually. So afterwards I was like, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I kind of gave them my elevator pitch, handed them my CV and my business card, and I said, if you ever need a clerk, please call. And it wasn't immediate, but 2 months later, I got a call with the Talaska law firm, and that's the firm I stayed at from the end of my 1L year to just this year. So I spent 5 years there in total.
Wow, that's incredible. There are 2 things that you mentioned right off the bat that I kind of caught on to, and it was the fact you had an elevator pitch, and then also that you had business cards. Obviously, you have your resume, everybody knows that, but 2 things I think a lot of people forget about is to have business cards, first of all, even though you're a law student, and then also to develop an elevator pitch. So can you kind of describe what was your mindset behind doing those things?
Sure. So, Houston has 3 law schools and a lot of lawyers. So I knew as a young lawyer with no connections in the city of Houston, I was going to have to make myself stand out. And I know in the world of sales, you are supposed to develop what's called your elevator pitch. That is, within 10 seconds or so, describe who you are, what you're selling, and why that person needs what you're selling. And essentially, in the job market, you're selling yourself. So I created this elevator pitch to say, okay, I need to explain to a potential employer within 10 seconds who I am, what I can offer them, and why they should hire me. So that was invaluable. And it's something I practice to my fiance. It's something I practice to Mir, my dog. Anyone would listen. I was getting them the elevator pitch because it's a skill you learn to develop. And what's important about an elevator pitch is you don't just have one. If you're pitching yourself to a civil firm, you need to have your civil firm elevator pitch. If you're pitching yourself to a criminal firm, you need to have the criminal elevator pitch. You really have to adapt your pitch to who you're, trying to get to buy you, essentially. So I did that, and the second thing I did was business cards, and that is, it's something tangible you can put in someone's hand, and in the legal profession, it's very common. So a CV may get lost in the vast amount of paperwork, but a card tends to go in people's pockets. And at the end of the day, everyone cleans out their pockets, and if your card's in there, you're going to stick in that person's mind. So I went to Office Depot. I got some cards printed on good cardstock that looked professional because, it represents you, and you start building your own brand in law school. So you wanted to develop your brand professionally. And in doing that is having this facade of professionalism. And that is having a CV that's clean, concise, and to the point, having business cards that are on good cardstock, good quality, and good fonts. And really, everything that you give to someone should be building your personal brand in the job market.
I love it. Yeah, that's exactly accurate. 100%. I stand behind exactly what you just said. Building a brand is so important and something I continue to stress with every law student I talk to. So let's go ahead.
And I would add, in terms of building a brand, as young lawyers and law students, we're in a unique position to do that. Our generation has utilized technology more so than any generation of lawyers and law students in the past, and we're doing it at a rate more than anybody else. So we're able to utilize social media, websites, and all these digital resources better than the previous generations. So we're really able to build our brand as young lawyers effectively, efficiently, and most importantly, very inexpensively. I mean, you can get a website, you can get a domain, your name at, yourname.com essentially for, $15 a year, and have an inexpensive WordPress site where you maintain a blog. You have your CV there. You have a little blurb about yourself. I mean, it's so inexpensive to do, but you get dividends out of doing it. So I would encourage all the young lawyers and law students to start building your brand on social media, on websites, in print. Any way you can to get your name and your brand out there, do it.
One of the areas that you're successful in that is your LinkedIn profile. And obviously I see that you have a lot of articles and writings that you've done. So can you talk a little bit about how you took advantage of any writing opportunities?
Sure. So as with my entire career, I created a niche for myself. And that is, in Texas, we have a trade publication called the Texas Lawyer. And I was just on Twitter one day and I saw that they were, looking for article ideas. So I had this idea of smaller firms needing to utilize law clerks, right? Everyone thinks clerkships, they think big firm. However, I think law firms and law students both overlook the benefit of a summer clerkship in small firms. So I contacted them, said, hey, I think this would be a great idea for an article for y'all to run. And they literally said, well, if it's so good, write it. And I said, okay. So I wrote my first article when I was, I think, a 2L on the benefits of clerks for small law firms. And basically, it was an elevator pitch in written form to small firms that basically they need to look at law students and clerks as a benefit to them. And the benefit is they get Westlaw access, they get Lexis access, they get access to your law library, right? So you're getting the practical experience and they're getting, we'll say less expensive help over the summer. And you're able to build that resource. You're able to build that network even more. And, what you invest in that small firm, you're going to get dividends out on the back end. It may not be monetarily, but you're going to have someone who's really pulling for you once you do graduate.
Well,
So
let West Long Lexus not hear what you just said about the free access
yeah,
from law.
exactly.
So go ahead. I mean, you mentioned that up until the past 5 years, you had been with the firm. So my next question was going to be, have you ever changed jobs at any point in your career? And you've recently done that. So do you mind explaining that process?
Sure. So what's unique is, like I said before, when I started my law firm and I just left this past month, I had 5 years experience, but I've only been out of law school for 3. And that's because I started working during, law school. And although those weren't, lawyer years, so to speak, it's still those years of practical experience that might as well have been lawyer years. Anyone who's clerked knows that you do a lot of the same things that the lawyers do. You may not do it on the level that they're doing it, but you're putting in the work, getting that practical experience. So I just transferred firms last year. I went from doing plaintiffs, medical malpractice, and pharmaceutical litigation to now doing corporate litigation. And the change stemmed from wanting to grow as an attorney. Because a lot of times you could find yourself doing the same type of law and almost the same type of case. And for some people, that's great. For me, I wanted something that was now a little more intellectually stimulating and something different. I was looking for a change, essentially. Because like I said, I've been doing it for 5 years, and that's really the only area of law I knew. So I was ready to expand my horizons, so to speak. So I utilized all the job boards. There's Monster, there's Indeed. But really, I found the most value out of LinkedIn, and that's how I got hooked up with my current firm, Kerr, Hendershot, and Cannon here in Houston, was through LinkedIn. I beefed up my profile to make sure it was current. So I beefed up all my online directories, including Avvo, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, just to make sure that everything was consistent across all my social media platforms. So in doing that, once you start updating these profiles, the algorithms that these websites use now show, okay, this person's active. So you start showing up a little more on people's searches. So when they're looking to hire a new associate or a new clerk, by updating your profile, you're now kind of at the top of this website's algorithm. So that was my first step. The second step was I looked at the job boards on LinkedIn, and I wasn't expecting to find much there, thinking, oh, no one really uses LinkedIn, right? It's more of a passive website. But the more I started looking, the more I realized that a lot of good firms were utilizing LinkedIn to find talent. And the reason they're able to do that is because you're able to get to people's resumes and CVs so much quicker than the traditional means of you email some HR person, hey, I'm interested, this is who I am. They say, okay, yeah, it sounds good, send your CV. It really cut out a lot of the middleman. So I found a lot of good results through using LinkedIn.
Definitely. So over the course of law school for externships, internships, and then when you graduated, you had a job, but then over the past year looking for another job, how many jobs do you think you applied for?
That's hard to say. I think I applied for a job a day for 3 months, truthfully. I mean, that's just the nature of the market right now, for young lawyers especially. Because when people are hiring laterals right now, they're looking for someone with significant experience. And one thing that I found frustrating from a civil perspective is firms that are hiring are looking for trial experience. And I will tell every young lawyer and law student out there that trials are becoming the way of the dinosaur for the most part. Unless you're doing a high volume practice of, say, car accidents, traffic tickets, or you're doing criminal law. But for the civil side, trials are becoming rare due to, mediation and arbitration. And so that was my biggest hurdle, is firms were wanting first chair trial experience. And as a young lawyer, I didn't have it. I had second chair trial experience, but first chair trial experience just, frankly, just doesn't really exist for young lawyers.
So you mentioned that the job process obviously took a while, and a lot of recent graduates are facing a very tough economy and a tough job market. So were there any times that you struggled or any challenges that you faced in this process? And then how did you overcome those?
The biggest challenge I had, and my wife can attest to this, was self-doubt. Because at some point, after sending in so many CVs and resumes and letters of interest to these jobs where you on paper are more than qualified for, after not getting responses even, you start to kind of turn that against yourself, you start to wonder, well, gee, have I bought into my own hype? Have I drank my own Kool-Aid to the point where maybe I'm not qualified for that job, or maybe I'm not as good as a lawyer as I think I am. So really combating that self-doubt was something I really had to push through, and that's something that I really relied on my support network to get me through. Because you could tell yourself all day long, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, you're good, but you really need to rely on your family and friends to really back you up. Because when you hear somebody else say, look, I know it's rough, but just because you're not getting a call back doesn't mean you're not a good lawyer, a good litigator, or whatever the case may be. It really affirms you and keeps that drive alive. Because I think without that, third-party affirmation, so to speak, it would have been hard to keep going. And that's just, that's the reality of the job market right now for young lawyers, unfortunately.
That's so true. A support group and surrounding environment that's positive. Definitely good advice. Now, you've dropped a couple hints, a couple tips along the way. Some great advice, whether it was the business cards or the elevator pitch or developing your online profiles and getting some writing samples out there. But what other advice, or what's the final piece of advice you would share with law students or recent graduates about finding a job?
The best piece of advice I've ever came across was take ownership in your career. And by what I mean to that is, as a law student and a young lawyer, it's very easy to say, I'll go with the flow. I'll go through career services at my law school for a job, or I'll wait till someone approaches me for a job. The reality is, you have to invest in your career. You have to take the initiative. You have to knock on doors. You have to go down the street and get rejected 50 times to get that one yes. But when you do get that yes, it's going to be so much sweeter because you earned it. You weren't handed the job. Career services didn't hand you the job. No one handed you the job but your own hard work. So I'd really encourage young lawyers and law students especially, take stock in yourself. Take your initiative and you pound the pavement and you knock on the doors and you're going to see great success.
And join the American Bar Association, right?
And join the American Bar Association. The Law Student Division's free. The YLD for a young lawyer is very inexpensive, and all the resources you get are great. I've worked my way up in the YLD. I'm now an editor for one of their publications, and I'll tell you, every year I've learned something new. I've met someone at the conferences where I picked up the phone and said, hey, I got this issue. I know you do this. Can you give me the curbside consult? It's just that building of the network that really just pays dividends in the long run.
Definitely. I totally agree with that. And I've done the exact same thing. It's a great place to find some mentors. So,
yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ray, for taking the time to talk today and share some awesome insights and experiences.
Thank you, Frank. This was great.
And thank you for watching. And make sure you subscribe for future episodes of How I Graduated from Law School with a Job.